Hello, everyone. What's going on? And welcome back to another episode of CXO Conversations. I'm Klaudia Tirico, editor at Demand Gen Report, and I'm so excited to have Lindsay Tjepkema, CEO of Casted, with me today. We're going to talk about a rising content format in B2B, podcasting. Hi, Lindsay. How's it going?
It's great. Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I'd love to just kick things off by simply, hearing more about Casted and what led you to start the company for B2B marketers, because I take it you are the CEO, but you also founded the company, right?
Truth. Yes. So basically the last 15 years of my career before starting Casted, I was in marketing. So most recently, I was a marketing leader heading up brand and content at a global enterprise SaaS company, and started a podcast there because, we were literally missing a voice, literally and figuratively. And so I had the pleasure of being the host and also seeing how the production and that strategy all comes together, and quickly noticed two things. One was I was happy that we did it. It was a great way to engage with our audiences, both externally, our potential customers, and also internally, our global team around the world that could rally around this medium and their efforts. So that was great. But the other thing I realized was that there was this gaping hole in the software that I needed and that my team needed to be able to leverage this content the way that we would any other content that was in our strategy. And so fast forward about a year later, I had the opportunity to help fill that void by getting started with Casted, and said, hey, there's enough need and there's enough opportunity to overcome this challenge and help other marketers like myself and my team to leverage podcasting as not just something that they do on the side, but as a really imperative, important, valuable element of their integrated content strategy.
Interesting. So what's the solution like? So it's everything from like beginning to end, planning, creating, editing, developing podcasts. Tell me a little bit about the software.
Sure. So the platform itself really picks up after you create your show. So that can look like this, like what we're doing right now. There's lots of companies that have, one person kind of doing their own thing. There's others that have full-on beautiful studios and everything in between. Some people work with agencies. And we say, okay, go create your show. And once you have it, upload it into the Casted platform, and then really everything else happens from there. We host it and syndicate it out to all of the big players like Apple, Google, Spotify. But then we also are really huge advocates of owning your audience. So when you have the opportunity to bring people into your own website to listen and experience that content, why not? So also within Casted, there's a show page and episode pages created for every single interview that you do, every single episode that you create. And then really there's lots of different tools and opportunities from there to really wring out that content and use it across other marketing channels like your blog, your email content, your social media content, and so on. That all happens in Casted. And then also attribution. So what impact is it really making on the brand? And then from there, so that's what the platform does, but then we also have services, to your point, that can help customers with the production, the actual creation of every episode, assist them in actually using the platform, and then actually more advanced marketing services to get even more value out of each and every piece.
Awesome. And obviously, podcasting has been a hot topic in B2B over the last few years. Tell me about what you're currently seeing in the space and how the landscape has kind of changed given our current situation right now.
Yeah. So it's, podcasting has been around since, the reason that it's called podcast is that it really was something that you would download onto an iPod, if you remember what those are. So it's been around for a while, but you're right. You're absolutely right. It's something that's become a lot more popular within the last few years. And so what we're seeing, kind of a little bit more macro, zooming out a little bit from this whole 2020 experience we're sharing together as humanity. Before all of this happened, podcasting really has grown because it's an exceptional opportunity for brands to be where your audience is. audiences really want to consume content in ways that are more richer, like audio content, that they can get into a conversation that you and I are having and listen in and feel more connected to us and to the brands that we represent. So podcasting is exploding for good reason, and brands are hopping on board because it's a great way to connect with your audience. Zooming in a little bit more to this year and in the last several weeks that we've all been in, what we've seen is that in March, when so many of us started working remotely, podcast listenership did take a little bit of a dip because commutes, whether it's you're driving or commuting on a train or walking, that time just evaporated. But it really, over the next few weeks, in April, started to pick back up because people were looking for different opportunities to pull it back into their life. People are going for more walks during the day now. People are exercising at home and need something. It's a great way to have an outlet and to reconnect with the outside world. And so our listenership has definitely been impacted, but not negatively. People are just listening in different ways, which has been really interesting to watch.
Very cool. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of our audience right now and B2B marketing professionals in general see podcasts as, a form of educational, like top of funnel type of content. But also, there's an entertainment and empowerment version of it. So what types of podcasts are really working for B2B marketers today? Are there even, can you talk about like the different varieties of podcasts that you're seeing from your clients?
For sure. So, there are, we're talking about how long podcasts have been around. There are several that have been in place for several years. I mean, Salesforce is one of our great users that's been doing podcasts for, I think, since 2014 is when they launched the Salesforce Marketing Cloudcast, and then they've spun out other shows since then. So Salesforce Drift is another customer that has a network of shows. So those are really great examples of continuously looking for opportunities to connect with different personas, different subsets of your audience with different topics, and being able to identify opportunities to connect with people in different ways, and saying, okay, this is a really great opportunity to have these experts inside of our brand talk with this audience outside. So it's a great way. We're seeing lots of networks emerge. Something else that we've started to see a lot of is internal podcasts. So yes, what a lot of us think of is a way to engage with our external audience and potential customers. But what about companies, especially very large companies that have sales forces around the world and are trying to deliver information about new products, new services, updates, company news. And so that's something that's really growing as a way to reach your team, especially now that we're so dispersed, in a way that is feels relational and intimate and more connected than sending out an internal newsletter.
I love that. And now, do you see the strategy and the planning and production, the best practices in general, change for all these different types of applications, even compared to just your standard podcast kind of format?
I get asked that a lot as far as if I'm doing a show this way, if I'm doing an internal podcast, for example, or if I'm doing a show, if I'm thinking about doing one that's, a 5-minute show daily. That's another trend that I forgot to mention. Terminus does that they do a daily show and they're doing something really, really often. Or if I want to do one less often, I want to do one once a month. Regardless of the format or the frequency or even the topic, the one thing that remains the same is asking yourself, who is it for? Who is my audience? And why am I doing it? And then from there, everything really remains the same as far as how you structure it. If it all goes back to knowing who your audience is and what they would expect and need to get out of your content that you're producing as part of your show, and why you're doing it, what you're hoping to get out of it for your brand, for your team, for your company, really from there, it's very similar.
Interesting. And just out of curiosity, I mean, I imagine maybe some people think that it's like this whole major process and you need these beautiful microphones and different types of, hardware and things like that to really get a podcast going. Is that true? Like, do you really need like a huge budget and a lot of all this like fancy equipment to really get started, or can you kind of start small?
I mean, as far as equipment, I run a podcast, a company that's all about podcasting, right? And literally, on video, you can see my microphone. Like I have a microphone, a Blue Yeti microphone, and my computer. and some, old school Apple earbuds, wired earbuds. That's it as far as equipment is concerned. Now from there, as far as how you produce the show, what sort of format you want to do, how highly produced you want it to be, if you're leveraging some software or a platform like Casted to get even more out of it, that's where strategically more of an investment comes into play. And not even, so yes, financial investment, budget investment, but also, people, who all is going to be involved? Are you going to bring an agency into it? But as far as literally just tangible equipment, a microphone, a computer, and some old school Apple earbuds. That's all you need.
I love it. I love it. And you also mentioned earlier when we were just talking about the platform in general, you did mention repurposing, and I'd love to kind of get into that topic a little bit, because are your clients really taking up, their podcast content and really maximizing the reach and value, with expanded content, whether, I know you mentioned blog posts and things like that. So repurposing is valuable, I assume, but tell me a little bit more about how that kind of works.
Yeah. And therein lies really the whole purpose, the big why of Casted, right? So yes, anyone with a microphone and a computer can start a podcast, but what you do with it from there is what makes all the difference. So I would say, stepping back a little bit, make sure that before you launch your show, you're committed. You're committed enough to producing great content. Blogs are something that are perhaps much more familiar to all of us. We've been doing it longer. You wouldn't start a blog and just have one post in mind and then, abandon it, right? You're going to have a strategy. You're going to have a thought process for how you're going to do this, for frequency, for publishing, cadence. Same goes with podcasting. So give it a fair shot. Go into it, understanding what you're hoping to get out of it. Again, who it's for, why you're doing it. But then the mistake that I see a lot of brands making today is saying, okay, we're going to start a podcast, we're going to publish it, and that's it. And so they publish it, they probably promote it a little bit on social media, and then they're on to the next thing. They're leaving so much value on the table. And really that's where Casted comes into play, is to say, yes, publish your show. That's great. Yes, have a show page where it lives on your website. And anytime you have the opportunity to send people to listen to your show, bring them to your page to listen there. So you can really own your audience and own their experience as they consume your content. But then what, right? So within Casted, they get for example, a transcript that you can use to, yes, for SEO purposes, but also as starter content for your blog, for email marketing, for web content. How can you leverage clips from each and every episode to share in your sales cadences, to leverage on social media? So it's looking for all those different opportunities to use it. That conversation, like this conversation that you and I are having, how else can we use it across other channels that we're already using as well? Open View Partners is one of our customers that does a really great job with that. They get a lot of value out of every single recording, every single interview that they do, and looking for ways to constantly repurpose and reuse and bring out every single episode. It's really interesting.
I love that. Very cool. And, for those not really doing podcasts but want to start, or those who are actually already doing podcasts but just want to improve, what kind of tips or takeaways would you provide them right now? What should people be doing? Are there any do's and don'ts? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think going back to that whole idea of asking yourself, how can you get more out of every single episode, right? If you are simply publishing and then moving on to the next, or publishing and then promoting just that show, how can you look for opportunities to cross-pollinate, right? To integrate that episode with other content that you're doing? How can you pull content from that episode and use it across your other marketing channels, and vice versa? How can you, in other marketing channels, be fueling your podcast? So really thinking as integrated and big picture, and how does it all work together? That's where those that are seeing the most value are really getting the upper hand. So that's one. I would also say, again, I mentioned this before too, but taking a step back every once in a while, looking at how the show is performing, and constantly asking yourself, could we be better if we knew our audience better? Who is this for? What do they want? who do they want to hear from, as opposed to what do we want to tell them? What do they actually want to hear? Just asking yourself that simple question over and over will just make your show that much more relevant to your audience.
Awesome. And, you just touched on it, and I figured, all right, let's go to this question right now, because, we want to see how they're performing, right? And then in order to, improve them and make sure the audience is getting what you kind of promised them. So what are the best ways to measure the impact of podcasts and really determine success and even kind of, I guess, even get the executive level, all the CEOs and CMOs, and how do we get everybody on board with it in terms of measuring and showing that kind of podcast success?
Yeah. So one of the shortcomings with podcasting in general, and one of the reasons that, one of the things that frustrated me in my past life and led me to starting Casted, and one of the things we hear over and over and over as we talk to brands that are thinking about doing podcasting is, I'm just so frustrated with the metrics, and all you really get is this number of downloads, and what does that even mean? And so I'm a huge advocate, and at Casted we're big advocates of telling the broader story, understanding engagement. That's the story that B2B marketers and just B2B brands in general want to understand, as far as what's happening with their brand and what's happening with the content that they're putting out there. Are people engaging? If so, how and where and in what ways, and what should we do more of? And what impact is this work that we're doing making on the brand and on the business's bottom line? And so we look at things like, yes, sure, listenership, but where are people coming from? Where are people going to once they engage with our content? How are they engaging? Are they listening to the different clips that we've pulled? Are they listening to the whole episode? Are they returning? So are we gaining new customers, and are we attracting people to come back over and over and over? Are they loyal to the show? Are they looking forward to new episodes dropping? And then bigger picture, what topics when we cover are most interesting? When we phrase things this way, or title clips this way, or approach an episode this way, is it more or less appealing to our audience? And that fuels strategy moving forward. And that's all about engagement. That's why you're putting content out there, right? Whether it's podcasts or something else. Are people interested? Are they getting out of it what you're hoping that they're getting out of it? And so we're trying to provide those metrics that tell that bigger story, that go far beyond, something vanity metrics like number of downloads.
Very interesting. And to be honest, how would you even kind of gauge whether or not your audience actually wants to listen to a podcast? Mm-hmm. Do you kind of like look at all the other content that they're consuming and figure it out that way? How does that work?
Yeah, kind of two answers to that question. So broadly speaking, podcast listenership in general, just across the board, is just exploding. Year over year growth like crazy. In 2019, it became official that if you weren't listening to podcasts, you were officially in the minority. More people were listening to podcasts than those that weren't. And so you look at that, and you look at the rate that it's increasing. Of those that listen weekly, they're spending almost 7 hours a week listening to podcasts. And so it's clear that, at least broadly speaking, unless your audience is part of the outliers, people want content that they can consume this way. Why? Because it's more intimate. It's more relational. It makes you feel more connected to, you and I are having this conversation. People feel more connected to this conversation that we're having and to the brands that we represent. So I think it's a safe assumption that your audience probably does. Now, your audience is different than my audience, which is different than, this company's audience, and so on and so forth. So the only thing to do, just like we do with any other marketing tactic or effort or strategy, is to test it, try it out. But when you do, give it a fair shot. Give it 6 months or a year. It's got to be an initiative that you really commit to and stand behind, because it takes a little while to grow an audience. It takes a little while to get people's attention and to get people listening, and then to get feedback. And then that feedback, again, comes in the way of engagement. Is listenership growing? Are people coming back when they listen to for the first time? Are they listening most of the way through? Are they sharing it? And really, it's putting it out there. Everything is data. So put something out there, see what data you get back, and then how can you improve and make it better over time?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely just every conversation I have. It's like it all goes back to the data. It's just, as long as it's clean, it's there. Everything else will kind of go into place. But let's talk a little bit about you. Tell me about your role as CEO at Casted, and how long have you been in that role, and kind of what have been some of your top priorities and key learnings so far?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I was a marketing leader before jumping into the entrepreneur, founder, CEO seat. And really making this leap, it started about almost a year and a half ago. So my official first day was April 29th. And since then, gosh, what has it been like? I mean, moving from marketing leader to CEO. I mean, on day one, I was CEO of a company with no employees, right? And then I brought on 2 co-founders, which was fantastic. And, we worked together to really get things rolling. And, my marketing roots were really, really helpful to me there, because the first thing I did was, who's it for? Why are we doing it? Right. So I started asking a lot of questions and talking to a lot of marketers and understanding why they're doing podcasts, why they're not doing podcasts, what kind of challenges are they facing? Because I didn't want all the assumptions just to be my own, right? I didn't want to build this thing in a vacuum. And then from there, we've built the team. We've got 14 people right now as we record this. And it's just, it's been an interesting transition. In some ways, it's just made perfect sense. In other ways, it's been interesting not to, sit down and own marketing every day. But on the other hand, everything is marketing. Raising our seed round. The end of last year, there was a whole lot of marketing there, right? And building the brand of the business and representing who we are and where we're going. There's a lot that transfers over from marketing leadership to being the CEO and co-founder of a tech company, especially when it's marketing technology. It's been a really interesting, incredible journey so far.
Awesome. And given that the title of the series is CXO Conversations, what kind of conversations or discussions are you kind of having with other marketing leaders or other CEOs? Are there any, questions that are really arising, any priorities changing, even like stress levels? What is that like for your peers?
Yeah. So I have, as I'm sure you can imagine, it comes with the territory. I have a lot of conversations. Our own podcast, the Casted podcast, that's what we do. It's talking to other marketing leaders and business leaders about specifically where podcasts fit into their strategy. But bigger picture than that, and actually the season that we just did before was about how they were adjusting, given the crisis that we're all in, and how strategies were changing and budgets were changing. And I would say, generally speaking, marketing leaders and business leaders, so talking, CMOs, CEOs, the thread that is constant is that now more than ever, they're looking for ways to connect with their audiences, despite the fact that we can't physically be together. They're looking for ways to build trust, build relationships, stay at the forefront of their minds, cut through all of this digital noise that we're experiencing more now than ever, and really be that trusted advisor, that outlet, that, whatever role that brand wants to play, they're looking for ways to do that in kind of newer, different ways, or to double down on things they're already doing. Podcasts are a really, really great way to do that. And so we're seeing an increase there in interest, as I mentioned earlier, both externally and internally. And as far as stress level, I think, we're all in this together. I don't think I've seen any outliers with marketing leaders or business leaders that the rest of us aren't experiencing. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of hopefulness and optimism, but also there's some fear. But I think, especially when you're talking to the C-suite, it's a lot of hopeful optimism and creative thinking about what's next. I'm also seeing more, which I love, more of just a human interest, just the human element across the board. There's much more thought about our teams and the health and well-being, psychological safety of our teams and of our customers. How can we better serve each other? How can we better serve our customers in the midst of all that's happening, and not add to the noise and add to the crazy, but actually add some relief? And so I think that's a shared thing we're all going through, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, even, as a CEO, how are you kind of leading your team to just stay sane during this whole kind of process. Everybody's working from home, and, they have their own kind of stuff going on in the background, but, they got to show up to work every day anyway. So what are there any either fun things that you're doing with the rest of the team to kind of keep everybody's morals up, or what does that look like at Casted?
Yeah, well, ultimately you'd have to ask the team. I hope that they would, echo, or, anything that I'll say here. But, from day one, we had the luxury of, we went into this with 10 people. So we've grown by 4 since starting this whole thing in March. And we had the luxury of being small enough to be just open and honest and transparent and like, what do you want? How are you doing? As opposed to trying to move, hundreds of people into remote. We're also, a SaaS business, so being remote is pretty seamless. All of that said, we've been really, really clear all along, saying, you do what you need to do. Take care of yourself, not only because that's, as humans, like, you need to, and you are so valuable. You're the most valuable part of this company. We need you. We need you to be able to give this your best effort when you do show up to work. We want you ready and energized and passionate and fueled up and ready to give this journey that we're on your best effort. And so in order to do that, we all need rest. We need mental breaks. A lot of us have kids or on the other end of the spectrum are completely alone. And so you do whatever you need to do, which is not the same thing that I need to do, to be able to fire on all cylinders. And if that means working different hours, awesome. If that means communicating in different ways, awesome. If that means showing up for video calls internally without your video on because you just need a minute and you need to not be on video for that day. Zoom fatigue is real. Just trying to be really, really open and transparent and vulnerable and authentic as humans in this whole thing, and just say, hey, whatever you need to do, we're all in this together. And as long as we're still working towards our goals and getting done what we need to do to, build this company, then let's do that. We've also had just something really tangible. We've had a daily check-in. It's purely optional every day at lunch, that if you just need to ask, it's like that office time, right? If you need to just see what people are eating for lunch and how people's kids are doing and, get a shot of someone's pets. That's been a really great way to just stay human together. So highly encourage that.
I love that. Stay human together. That's my new favorite line. Well, Lindsay, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much. Any parting words on how we, how you believe that the podcasting space will evolve as we navigate this new world of, online interaction and not really face-to-face engagement, but just virtual?
Yeah, I think just to sum it all up, now perhaps more than ever, maintaining that human to human connection is so important. From a company leadership perspective, it's what we were just talking about with your team. From a brand perspective, it's how can you maintain that and build and grow that connection with your audience. I'm certainly biased, but I think for good reason. Conversations, recording them, turning them into shows is a great way to start. And then saying, okay, if that's the center of everything we do, going and having great conversations with experts that our audience wants to hear from, how can we make that the center of everything and really wring everything out, spin everything else out from there, and have that through line of relevance in everything that we do. So just ask yourself how you can do that and how a podcast could fit into that picture for your brand, and ask yourself why you haven't started doing it yet.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lindsay. This was a great conversation to have. And I always love talking to, female entrepreneurs and boss ladies. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone who has been watching the series so far and for checking out the episode. Hopefully we'll bring you more great conversations in the future as well. So if you do want to be joined, want to join me for a conversation, please just drop me a line at Klaudia@g3com.com. We'll get something going. And Lindsay, thanks again. And thank you, everyone. Please stay safe and sane.